Greetings, wandering souls of purgatory. I'm Nicholas from Purgatory Diaries, and this is the second part of the narration of my ebook, Purgatory Diaries, My Soul to Take. This multi-part video is made in collaboration with Kirana ASMR, a friend and fellow whispered horror narrator on YouTube. Before we continue with the next chapter in the story, make sure to check out the first part of the narration on her channel, linked in the description of this video. I also recommend watching some of her other multi-part horror narrations. They're great creepy stories. Back to the story at hand. Without any further ado, let's continue right where we left off in the first part. We find our protagonist, Michael, unable to sleep and troubled by recurring nightmares. So, he decides to read another story from the newly acquired crimson-covered book collection. The Bloody Mary Game. A few weeks ago, I went on a school trip to visit a couple of museums in the capital, so we had to spend a few nights at a hotel. It was bound to be just another boring experience, but that time it was not the case at all. On the first night, when we got back to the hotel, I met Nicole, a girl from another school that was visiting the same places as us. Her room was right next to mine, so she introduced me to some of her friends, and we got along pretty well. After a couple of hours, I went back to my room and got ready for bed. It was almost midnight, and as I was brushing my teeth, I could hear the girls laughing, so I put my ear against the wall and tried to listen using the glass resting on the sink. I couldn't quite make out what they were saying, but it sounded like Nicole and her friends were murmuring and giggling. I assumed it was just some good old-fashioned gossip and went to sleep. The following day, when I met up with Nicole and the crew, I asked her about the previous night. She said they were playing the Bloody Mary Truth or Dare game. It's like playing Truth or Dare by spinning a bottle, but with a twist, she said. Basically, if you chose truth, you'd have to share a personal secret about yourself. Otherwise, you would be dared to say Bloody Mary 3 times while staring at yourself in the mirror with the lights off, only having a dim flashlight pointed at your face. It is said that if you complete those steps, Bloody Mary will come and take your soul, or some nonsense along those lines. Another important rule was to record yourself while you completed said ritual. I laughed about it and asked if I could join in, and she naturally invited me to come back to her room around midnight and play with them. After yet another exhausting museum tour, it was finally time for the game. Once we were all back at the hotel, I changed clothes as fast as I could and rushed to Nicole's room, eager to have some fun after such a boring day. After a few quick turns and witnessing Nicole scaring some of the other girls, it was my turn to take the flashlight to the bathroom. I said the name twice without any hesitation. However, when I was about to say it for the 3rd time, a cold chill went down my spine, and I almost turned on the lights. Then I heard Nicole calling me a chicken, so I just shouted, "Bloody Mary," at the top of my lungs. I could feel myself clenching my teeth as soon as I uttered the words, as if I was getting ready for Bloody Mary to come, or most likely just Nicole trying to scare me. To nobody's surprise, nothing happened, and we carried on with the game for a couple more rounds before going to sleep. 3 weeks have passed since that night, and I have gathered some friends at my house to teach them the game. Some of them are real scaredy cats, but they're too proud to admit it, especially the guys. I think we'll hear a few screams tonight. I can't wait. We're about to start the game, and I offered to go first. I wonder if somebody will try to scare me. And quite frankly, I kind of want them to. The rush of adrenaline and the silly look on one's face when they get scared of their own reflection is quite something. As I enter the bathroom with the lights off, I proceed to say the name 3 times. After a few seconds, I hear my friends complaining that they didn't hear me. So I just say it again 3 more times. After a brief moment of silence, I notice a slender figure behind the shower curtains. It looks a bit like my little sister. She's rather short for her age and has long, wavy hair. I bet she's trying to scare me. The other kids waited for about 5 minutes before checking in on their friend. They turned on the lights and she wasn't there, but the window was wide open, so they all laughed and thought she ran outside to scare them by knocking on the door. Her sister picked up the phone and replayed the recording. After the 6th Bloody Mary, a dark silhouette of a girl appeared to come out from behind the curtains. As she got closer to the mirror, dark red streaks could be seen on her face, almost like she had been crying blood. A couple of seconds later, the phone just turned itself off, and so did the lights. Chapter 4. Unlike the first time he read one of these stories, that time around, upon finishing the second one, Michael did not feel unease nor dread. The story itself creeped him out a little, that was true, but all he felt after closing the dark red covers was weariness. For the first time in weeks, he jumped right into bed and fell into a deep, peaceful slumber. He rested uninterrupted by any nightmares nor tormenting images when he closed his eyes. The next day, he woke up refreshed and in a rather good mood compared to the past couple of months. The sun shone brightly into his living room through the half-open blinds. Michael spent a couple of hours just relaxing under the sunshade, contemplating his little garden. As the sun rose higher into the sky, so did the temperature along with it. Michael was craving a cold beer to quench his thirst, but he had none left in the refrigerator. He has basically been living off coffee and biscuits for the past few restless days, not allowing the minor inconvenience to ruin his good mood. He grabbed his baseball cap and headed towards the grocery store down the road. After a 10-minute walk into the scorching sun, he let out a sigh of relief when walking into the air-conditioned store. It was almost noon, so there were not too many people walking about due to the heat. However, there were a few people in the store. An elderly couple walked by Michael, exiting the store with their groceries as a woman and her daughter were browsing through the fruit and vegetable aisle. Michael greeted the store clerk and headed right towards the refrigerators in search for some ice-cold beverages. The beers were at the back of the shelf, so he had to reach in for them until he was all the way up to his shoulder inside the refrigerator. Just as he grabbed the six-pack by one of its plastic rings, he heard a strange metallic chuckle, causing him to release the beers and slightly hit his head on the top shelf, rattling the glass soda bottles that were resting on it. The commotion distracted the little girl, which was merely eating a bag of cheese puffs just around the corner of the aisle, whilst her mother was weighing some cabbages on the store scale a few meters away from her. Michael looked around, scratching his head, but there was no one around. Assuming it was merely a noise coming from the refrigerator, he shrugged it off and opened the sliding doors again. Must have been the fridge. I was practically inside the damn thing, so it makes sense for the sound to echo around like that, he concluded, reaching once again for his drinks. When the sliding doors shut, he heard a distorted high-pitched voice calling his name once, followed by what sounded like a little girl weeping. Startled, he dropped the six-pack with a loud bang on the floor. Disoriented, Michael spotted the girl standing right next to him. She was staring at him with tears in her eyes and an orange-red dry streak coming down her cheek. "You're crying blood," he affirmed as he grabbed the little girl by the shoulders and started shouting, "What do you want from me, girl?" Naturally, the girl started sobbing. The tears smudged the cheese puff stain on her cheek even more, alarming her mother as she dropped the cabbages and rushed to check on her daughter. The sound of the dropping vegetables snapped Michael out of the incapacitating state of shock. Visibly confused, he let the little girl go right before her mother came rushing around the corner. The girl immediately jumped into her mother's arms. "I'm not crying blood, right, Mommy?" she stammered as her mother wiped away the cheesy stain from her face and reassured her. "It's just a stain from the puffs, dear. Let's go home." Michael tried to apologize, but it was in vain. The woman, noticeably concerned, paid for the snacks and left in a hurry, not even bothering to pick up another cabbage on her way to the register. Ashamed, Michael grabbed the six-pack off the floor and paid for it. The clerk gave him strange looks, but hesitated to comment on anything related to the incident, and neither did Michael. When he finally got home, after a slow, bewildered walk back, he just dropped the beers on the kitchen table and did not even feel like having one anymore. The good mood was definitely gone now. He went straight to the bathroom to wash his face, seeing himself in the mirror. He stood still as the cool water droplets slowly made their way down to his neck, dampening the light blue color of his summer shirt. His thoughts once again fled to the book he had read the night before, but he quickly slapped his cheeks a couple of times with both hands and ran out of the bathroom, shutting the door behind him. He laid on the couch for the rest of the day, mindlessly zapping through the television channels. "I should get back to my writing," he thought, but he did not feel compelled to do so. As night's darkness slowly crept in, he decided to go to sleep early. He made his way upstairs to the bathroom, yearning for the previous night's peaceful sleep. He turned off the lights and closed his eyes, but unfortunately, sleep failed to arrive until it was almost morning. Michael was tossing and turning all night, and when the exhaustion eventually caught up with him, the nightmares came back, worse than ever. Michael found himself back at the store, holding the refrigerator's glass door open, staring at his reflection in the fogged-up glass. The little girl was behind him again, but she seemed different somehow. Her eyes were completely black, and she was staring with her head tilted at an uncomfortable angle, completely motionless. He slowly closed the door, and as the glass started to clear out, blood started pouring out of the girl's eyes. Michael was paralyzed, and he could not bring himself to turn around. As the reflection slowly disappeared, the girl let out a bone-chilling wail. He woke up on the floor screaming and covering his face. As he calmed down, he noticed the pillows were tossed all over the wooden floor, and the bed sheets were all shifted and crumpled, apparently from his restless struggles to fall asleep. It felt like the nightmare went on for ages, but it was still pretty early in the morning when he woke up. He felt even more exhausted than before going to sleep, and in a futile attempt to clear his mind, he decided to continue writing his story. He never really quite figured out what kind of atmosphere would better fit his story before the auction. But as the nightmares haunted him day in and day out, his writing slowly started to morph into a dark and eerie tale, not unlike the rest of the volumes from the collection. Michael soon realized that the sleepless nights and night terrors would not stop anytime soon, so he tried to keep himself busy with his writing. He was actively avoiding sleeping, and it worked, for a couple of weeks anyway. Chapter 5. Michael could not recall when was the last time he went out of the house, as he was throwing away an empty cardboard pizza box. He glimpsed the unopened six-pack of beer on the table right where he left it so many days ago, since he never bothered to put them in the refrigerator. After the grocery store incident, he was quite reluctant to interact with other people. His mood swings caused by the constant exhaustion did not help either. Who would even want to talk to me looking like this? I'm a mess, he deplored when catching a glimpse of his unkempt beard and the huge bags under his eyes in the mirror. As the sadness and exhaustion overwhelmed him, he was starting to doze off right there in the bathroom, while supporting his weight with his arms resting perilously on the wet sink. The unwelcome sound of a weeping girl distracted him as his hand slipped, causing him to fall down and hit his head on the toilet seat. All he could hear before losing consciousness was that tormenting weep, crawling its way out from the back of his mind into his daily life. Please make it stop, he sobbed as he closed his eyes. The nightmare started with a metallic chuckle, followed by what he could only make out to be unintelligible whispers. His mind could not focus on them, since the weeping of the little girl was getting louder and louder. He looked around, noticing his writing desk. Is this my house? He asked himself, as he struggled to make out the rest of the room. It was strangely dark, and the only visible area was the desk, dimly lit by the flickering light of his reading lamp. The chuckle and whispers appeared to be coming from that direction, and before Michael could get there, the rustling of fabric behind him stopped him in his tracks. He turned around and noticed his bookshelf, lit up by a strange reddish glow. There were no books on it, and instead, he witnessed dozens of tiny dolls with blonde pigtails adorned with red dotted ribbons, all of which were covered in blood spatter. The shelf began to creak as the dolls started to shake violently, rapidly moving their limbs around with sharp gestures, causing the rustling of their minuscule dresses. Many of them were falling off the shelf into the darkness of the floor. As the creaking of the dolls' limbs and the rustle of their dresses continued coming from the unwelcoming darkness, the dreadful weeping of the little girl emerged once again, getting louder and louder. Michael stood there frozen, his heart racing as the hair stood up on the back of his neck. He felt a cold breath on his shoulder, followed by an awful metallic whisper. He could not make out most of it, but he managed to recognize the word book and between the cries and creaking of the wooden dolls. As he started feeling what he could only describe like tiny hands scratching at his ankles, he swiftly turned around and noticed a book on the desk. He started running towards it as the whisper stopped, followed by a fading metallic chuckle. He ran for what felt like hours, terrified to look back, while still hearing the cries and the tiny wooden stomps on the floor. However, they eventually started fading away as well once he finally got hold of the book. The book had a familiar dark red leather cover, which burned his hands when he touched it. As he painfully opened the book's covers, a blinding light accompanied by the heat of 1,000 suns hit Michael's face. He began screaming in agony and subsequently woke up. He had an agonizing headache and noticed a tiny blood stain on the floor where his head had laid down for the past couple of hours. While sitting on the cold bathroom floor, Michael gawked at his bookshelf and the numerous dark red books resting on it. That was when it all made sense to him. I must keep on reading if I want to get rid of the nightmares, he stuttered as he hastened to grab another book. He sat down on the couch, holding the selected book with both arms, with the utmost care, almost as if it were a newborn child. He was still a bit shaken up by the dream, and the pounding pain coming from the top of his head got more intense with every breath he took. But none of that mattered, since he felt a sense of sweet relief. It will get better soon, he reassured himself as he opened the book. Feeling safe once again, Michael smiled as he glanced over the red title on the first page. Meanwhile, a drop of blood from his right temple came falling on his sleeve. He carefully rolled it up so as to not stain the pages in the process, as he read the subtitle describing the next story. Growl. My dog has always been kind of overexcited, running up and down the corridor, jumping all over our guests, relentlessly barking and so on. I'm aware it's probably my fault for not being strict enough and encouraging this type of behavior when he was a puppy. However, over the past few days, he has been very quiet, a bit too quiet. He's always hiding under the bed or behind the curtains, and sometimes he even tries to hide under our linens, which is unusual since he's never allowed on the bed. Up until today, I just shrugged it off. It was peaceful not having him running about all the time, but right now, he won't come out from under a few boxes laying on top of an old pallet in the basement. It's been a couple of hours already, and all I managed to get out of him is this strange, unnatural growl whenever I try to get close to the boxes. Maybe he ate something that didn't sit well with his stomach. All I know is that it doesn't sound like him at all. I flipped the light switch on, but the light bulb just blew, causing the growling to start again. He sounds so angry, and I'm worried that he might be hurt. I decide to lay flat on my stomach and reach out to him in the pitch black darkness, hoping to grab his collar. As my eyes slowly adjust to the darkness, I feel his warm breath on my hand, joined by the slight yet eerie vibration of his guttural growl. He's never bitten me before, but I can't shake off this sense of dread as I move my hand in closer. Suddenly, I hear a dog yelping from the opposite side of the basement. and I instinctively turned my head around, only to notice my dog curled up in the corner, staring at the creature baring its sharp teeth from under the boxes. Chapter 6. Once he finished the story, Michael put the book back on the shelf, albeit reluctantly. I could never really stand dogs, he remembered as he slowly removed his fingertips from the warm leather book cover. He felt exposed without the book, but he did not dare to start another story right now. They will end eventually, and what will I do then? He pondered as he tried to count how many books there were in the whole collection. He barely made it past the number 11 when the headache made itself known once again, causing him to have blurry vision. It was not getting any better, and as he struggled to focus on his reflection in the mirror, he could notice the bump on his head had swollen up considerably. Concerned, he washed away most of the blood from the right side of his face and grabbed the van keys. As he was pulling the van out of the garage, his vision was almost back to normal, for now at least, so he drove away to the emergency room at the local hospital. It was quite a short drive, since the hospital was in the center of the town, not far away from his house. After all, you're never more than 15 minutes away from any place in town, as the locals used to tell Michael when he first arrived. The blurry vision would come back for short periods of time every now and then, but he got there safely and without any incident. As he was sitting on a chair in the waiting room, Michael noticed a poster advertising some kind of allergy medicine. It depicted a brown Labrador laying in the grass. He was staring at the dog's eyes when his view distorted once again. Through the blur of dark brown and green colors, he could make out from the poster he noticed two shining white orbs of light coming from both its eyes. The nurse called his name as he was struggling to focus on the image. His vision got back to normal as soon as he turned around to face her. Michael told the doctor about the bathroom accident, the headache, and the blurry vision. When asked about the cause of the fall, he eventually admitted that he has not been sleeping well and has been having nightmares. The doctor prescribed something for the swelling, also recommending some mild sleeping pills to help him get some rest. After showing him out, the nurse kindly advised him to come back if the blurry vision episodes and swelling do not get better in a couple of days. The sun was setting as he drove back home. The sky was glowing orange as Michael let out a deep yawn. He could not find the garage keys, so he left the van parked outside and walked inside the house. He was thinking about getting some writing done before bed, but he was noticeably too tired for it. He got changed, took his medicine, and climbed into bed, where he remained seated for a while. On the edge of the bed, he was staring at the sleeping pills for a couple of minutes, but eventually decided to put them inside the drawer of his night table and went to sleep. Chapter 7. There were no nightmares present, but Michael's sleep was far from peaceful. The pulsating pain came back after a couple of hours. It kept waking him up every half hour until he glimpsed the morning sun, greeting him through the cracks of his shutters. Despite the struggle, he felt pretty rested and was in a much better mood than the day before. decided that after countless days of eating whatever dry snacks he had lying around in the cupboard in the morning, he would cook some breakfast for a change. He only had a couple of eggs and a piece of smoked bacon in the refrigerator, but that did not stop his good mood from flourishing, as he devoured the hot contents of the plate in just a couple of minutes. Following such a fulfilling meal, he sat down at his desk and started writing. Once he set his mind to such a dark tone for his story, it did not take too long for him to decide on what kind of conclusion he wanted for his story. He scribbled it down on a piece of paper and set it aside, continuing the story from where he left off. He kept himself busy for almost all day. However, he remembered to take regular breaks in order to eat and take his medicine. When nightfall inevitably crept in once again, he did not feel as exhausted, and the blurry vision episodes had decreased significantly. At around 9:45, he decided to stop working. So he grabbed a cold beer and turned on the television as he sat on the couch. The peace and quiet did not last long. While Michael was getting his third beer from the refrigerator, he heard a loud bang coming from the basement. The basement's wiring had been fried for ages, and he never got around to calling a contractor to fix them. He would always use the heavy-duty flashlight he took to auctions when going down there, but that was in the van parked outside. If somebody was down there, he could not waste time grabbing the flashlight and coming back. They could make a run for it, he whispered to himself as he grabbed a knife from the kitchen and headed downstairs into the darkness. As a car passed by his house, its headlights shone through the windows of the house and hit the glass of the basement's open door, casting an oblique flash of light down the stairs. That did not help Michael too much, since it was gone in the blink of an eye, and he was still making his way down the flight of stairs. Once he got down, he regretted not grabbing his phone as a possible source of light. Before he could consider heading back up, he heard a ghoulish growl coming from the back of the room. He froze into place, grasping the handle of the knife as hard as he could, staring hopelessly into the darkness. As he peeked down at the weak reflection of the light coming from upstairs, he noticed that, helplessly enough, his vision was starting to cloud up again. Unsure on how to act, he was trying to focus his view on the far corner of the basement, where he noticed two white dots of shining light standing out in the pitch-black darkness. He readied himself, anticipating another growl, followed by an attack perhaps. Tensed up, he was startled by a loud sound, not that of an animal, but that of an ear-splitting truck horn coming from outside. As the truck passed by, its massive lights reflected on the glass windows on the door once again, illuminating the wall in front of Michael. His eyes instinctively followed the light and spotted a dark, tall shadow figure on the wall. The shock caused him to drop his knife on the concrete floor and flee outside, as a faint chuckle could be heard coming from the darkness. He rushed to his van, grabbed a flashlight and a metal baseball bat from the back seat, then returned to the basement. Under the blinding light of the torch, the corner where he heard the growl had nothing to reveal, and neither did the wall where the shadow stood. Is my mind playing tricks on me? He asked himself as he slowly walked backwards up the stairs. He proceeded to lock the door leading into the basement and outside doors. He never locked himself inside the house before. Strangely enough, rather than feeling safe, Michael felt trapped. He could not sleep at all that night. So there he sat, baseball bat in hand, on a wooden chair he placed in front of the basement's door. The next day, he took advantage of the light coming in from the tiny windows in the basement to go back down and check if anybody or anything was there. Yet there was nothing, absolutely nothing. Not even a goddamn rat, he ranted. Not necessarily relieved, but mostly sure that nobody has invaded his house, Michael could let his guard down a little. He started thinking about the nightmares and the bugs. Those damn bugs. Are they helping me or are they making it worse? He wondered as he passed his hand over the bug spines. The dark leather-like material was always rather warm to the touch, and that baffled Michael. How could an inanimate object give out heat? Maybe it's because of the material. It could get heated up by the sunlight, he assumed, as he managed to move away from the shelf. That night, he finally decided to take the sleeping pills. He pulled the pill bottle out of the drawer and read the prescription. After a long while, he gulped them down and tried to get some well-deserved rest. He still had nightmares, but they were not as intense as the last time. He neither heard nor seen anything strange during the next day, so he kept taking the sleeping pills for the next week and a half. Chapter 8. Eventually, the sleeping pills were starting to run out, and the crippling anxiety was catching up to him again. For the past few days, he almost finished his book and lived a somewhat normal life, but as the sleeping pills were running out, his uneasiness was growing with each nightfall. Michael stared at the last 2 pills and took one. Just a couple of days of peace left, he sighed as he closed his eyes. But sleep did not come. He was staring at the spider dutifully casting his web in the corner of the ceiling when he noticed the time. It was 3:30, so he turned on the lamp and took the final sleeping pill, desperately hoping to get some sleep. As he was getting drowsy, he could make out a tall shadow figure getting closer. Before he could make out any details, his droopy eyelids shut, and so he drifted off to sleep, accompanied by the creepy lullaby of the metallic chuckle he heard so many times before. That time around, the nightmare was horrifying. It lasted for ages. The recurring screams of the little girl, the rivers of blood pouring out of her hollow black eyes, the unending pain of 100 little wooden hands with fingernails as sharp as a hawk's talons, ripping the flesh of Michael's calves to shreds. Leaving a pool of blood behind him, he was hopelessly trying to crawl away from the doll's grasp on his hands and knees, when he saw the bright white orbs again, right in front of his eyes. Then he heard it, an abhorrent growl that sent a freezing chill down his spine, while the creature bared his huge teeth. The creature went straight for his neck, piercing the jugular. As blood came gushing out, the cries of the little girl morphed into a burst of demonic laughter, while the creature held Michael down with its claws, slicing his forearm in the process. He lay there, bent to the ground, in unimaginable pain as the metallic a struggled sigh as the tall, dark shadow approached him once more. Before he fainted, Michael saw the dark, tall humanoid silhouette with the thick, ragged hood over its head. That was all he could make out, just a dark figure staring down at him as he passed out. He could not see its face, but somehow he knew it was smiling. With his last struggling breath, Michael felt a strange kind of relief as the spark of life was fading out of his eyes. However, it was far from over. His newfound macabre peace was disturbed by the piercing screech of a little girl. "It cannot be," he shouted as he opened his eyes. The taste of blood was gone. His wounds were nowhere to be seen either. Before he could even have time to smile, the sharp wooden nails started hacking at his feet again. That's when he realized it was starting all over again. He quickly rose to his feet and made a run for it. He kept running, but it was of no use. Everything was dark. Each corner of that huge room looked the same to him. And as panic started to set in a blink of an eye, it was all over. The growl, the glowing white eyes, and those huge claws. Warm streams of blood came rushing out of his mouth again, and finally, the chuckle, followed by darkness. After waking up once more, only to fall to that terrible beast again and again, Michael realized he was caught in a seemingly unending nightmare. It did not matter what he tried, it always ended the same way. As the painful loops ensued, he gave up hope. He stopped trying to run, did not even move, awaiting his inevitable demise, time and time again. Still, after what seemed like an eternity of darkness, a bright light appeared in front of his eyes as he was bleeding out on the floor. As the light scared away his tormentors, Michael gasped and closed his eyes. When he opened them again, he woke up on the wooden floor next to his bed, hyperventilating. Most of the pain was gone, but some tiny part of it still lingered. He unconsciously reached for his left forearm, where he saw 3 bloody scratch marks. He could only think of one thing. "Claw marks," he whispered in a shaky voice. Chapter 9. Michael did not sleep for the following 3 days in a row. He kept himself busy by writing and spending the late hours watching the sports channel. His desk was overflowing with discarded energy drink cans and stained coffee cups. However, realizing that he could not keep it up forever, he started browsing through the book collection whilst carefully caressing his bandaged arm. He dragged his wooden chair and sat in front of the bookshelf. He kept trying to think of some safe way out of the dilemma he found himself in. He was convinced that reading another book would certainly help him sleep peacefully for a couple of days at least. However, it seemed that every time he indulged himself with another tale, whatever horrible creatures haunted the yellowish tinted pages would join his current roster of demons and would just add to his torment. Quite a conundrum indeed. What to do? What to do? He stuttered as his head was getting heavy. He closed his eyes only for a brief moment, but that was enough to startle him. He jumped up and slapped his face so hard that the outlines of his fingers lingered on his now pink cheek. He hastily settled on the idea that he really needs to sleep, grabbed a random volume from the shelf. Home Sweet Home. So ironic, he snorted as he read the book's subtitle, recalling the night he locked himself inside, scared for his life right here in his own home. He hesitantly turned the page, worried about what kind of woeful misery awaited him at the end of these coarse pages. Alas, he could not stop himself from reading even if he wanted to. Home Sweet Home. The walls have ears, and your home shares your fondest memories. These are just a couple of rather meaningless things my grandmother used to tell me when I was a little girl. However, those words were the first thing that came back to me as I was fighting amnesia. Nobody had a clue why, and quite frankly, everybody was so happy that I was regaining my memory that nobody seemed to care about anything else. I didn't care either, not at first anyway. My amnesia was caused by an awful car accident, which I was lucky to survive, even though I've been suffering from a temporary amnesia for quite some time. My family had a particularly bad time with it, but it got better eventually. The first few weeks were horrible. I couldn't recognize anyone, kept crying myself to sleep, just felt overwhelmed by all the people trying to talk about who I was and what happened to me. After that, I went through a long period of denial, but as stubborn as I was, the bits and pieces started to come back, and I regained most of my long-term memory. I still don't recall all the minor things I used to do or like, but overall, I'm pretty much myself again. That's a good thing, right? Well, I don't really know. I had been discharged from the hospital just a couple of days ago, and now I'm back home. I should be happy about it, but something doesn't feel right. No, it's not the fact that I occasionally forget my brother's name, or forget where my room is, and other memory loss related issues. I was told that some of them are normal symptoms that linger on for a while, especially in cases as severe as mine. However, that's not what's bothering me. It's something else. I think I might be losing it. Maybe it's some kind of damage my brain has suffered, or maybe it's caused by all the stress I've been under. I really don't know what it is, but it freaks me out. And I sincerely don't know if I'm going crazy right now. It started as I was unpacking my stuff the other day. I found an earring, and then I spent quite some time turning the bags inside out, looking for the second one. Despite the effort, I failed to find it, so I asked my mother if she had seen it around the house. She smiled and sat down next to me. "You always put on just one earring, dear. It was like your own unique style of wearing earrings," she said, insisting that I've spent years wearing only the one earring. Apparently, the whole thing started when I was in such a hurry to a birthday party that I forgot to put on both earrings. Some boy I knew noticed it and said that I looked cool that way, and I've just stuck with it ever since. She also added that I only wear them both for special occasions. I tried to remember, but I couldn't. As I was struggling to access my lost memories, She asked if I wanted her to buy me a new pair. I told her I wanted to go back to my old habits, or at least give it a try. I thought it would help me regain my lost memory, so I put the earring in my left ear and continued to sort out my things. When I finally finished, I stood up and looked at our beautiful garden through the window. I suddenly noticed that my reflection displayed a brief shining light coming from my right ear. It looked like I had an earring in it, reflecting the sunlight. I was getting closer to the window when my mother came in without knocking on the door. The squeaking of the door's hinges startled me, and I momentarily forgot about the reflection. As I turned around, she noticed my earring and kindly told me that I put it in the wrong ear. I was freaking out, but assuming it was just my brain's way to remember things, I mentioned nothing about the reflection and tried my best to act normal. She went through a lot, and I didn't want to scare her, so I just took the earring off and went to sleep. Today, after I woke up, I mistakenly put the earring in my left ear again, and as I was brushing my teeth, the reflection once again had it in the right ear. It was not just a distorted reflection in the window. This time, it was a crystal clear image in the mirror, showing the earring in my reflection's right ear. My eyes were wide open, and I found myself compelled to put the earring into my right ear, terrified even to blink. The reflection simply stood still as I was doing it. Now it's in my right ear, and I'm staring at my reflection's dreadful grin as it strokes its right ear. Chapter 10. Michael set the book down and sighed heavily. He no longer felt safe with the book in his hands, since he knew that the false sense of security it provided would be quite short-lived, followed by another terrible addition to his torment once the nightmares grabbed hold of him again. He laid in his bed, staring out at the night sky through the window. He fell victim to a deep, dreamless slumber. A peaceful night's sleep. But at what cost, he thought, as he opened his eyes in the early morning. He went through the motions of his daily routine without really thinking about anything. Deep down, he knew that, eventually, the dark cold blanket of the night would come again soon, bringing unimaginable suffering once he fell asleep. He did not even bother to finish writing his story. He had the ending written down on a pile of loose pages on his desk, but he could not get around to writing it in the red book. He started to despise the feeling of the warm leather covers. Surely enough, the next day, the nightmares were back in full force. Aside from the usual dark room filled with his worst nightmares, now there was a huge mirror hanging on the wall, right across from the bookshelf where the ghastly collection of dolls stood. As Michael ignored the cries and the creaking of the dolls, he walked in front of the mirror and was greeted by his distorted reflection, bearing a revolting grin. He tried touching the mirror, but he woke up before he could reach it. While still visibly startled by the images he witnessed, Michael was experiencing a moment of clarity. He was certain beyond the shadow of a doubt that each book he read manifested in some way in his nightmares. Therefore, he rushed to the basement and grabbed a few cardboard boxes, filling them up with the collection of books. He He then sealed the boxes with tape and loaded them into the back of his van. He was going to get rid of them, but he could not just drop them into the dumpster across the street. I need to destroy them, he thought. He rushed inside the garage and grabbed a half-empty gasoline container and a box of matches. He drove all the way to the outskirts of town perilously, parking his van on an off-road dirt trail leading towards the river. He found a clearing away from any trees, and he unloaded the boxes right there, drenched them in gasoline, and set them on fire. He waited almost until nightfall, right when the last of the pages went out in smoke, and nothing but a pile of ashes remained. As the sun was setting, he drove back to his house with a broad smile on his face. "It's finally over," he said as he parked his van in the driveway across from his front door. It was still early, but he did not care. Finally, free of those cursed bugs, he wanted to rest. So he skipped dinner and went straight to bed, not even bothering to change his clothes, even though they were giving off a strong odor of smoke. To his despair, Michael's slumber was interrupted by a loud thud coming from downstairs. He slowly went down the flight of stairs and suddenly dropped to his knees, screaming. He noticed the open book on his desk, the one containing his unfinished story. It was part of the collection, but he forgot about it whilst disposing of the others. To make matters even worse, he also noticed a few sealed boxes resting next to the bookshelf. He was shaking violently as he struggled to open them, only to reveal the familiar crimson leather covers. The scratch marks on his left hand started itching, and the bump on the right side of his head started pulsating with pain as he crawled away from the boxes and started crying. After half a dozen hours lying on the wooden floor, he was starting to feel sleepy. "I cannot fall asleep," he told himself, as he was struggling to keep his eyes open. He shoved the boxes down the stairs into the basement and locked the door. Although it was an impulsive action, he remembered to include his unfinished book as well, along with all his drafts and notes, just in case. Michael bravely resisted the urge to sleep for almost a full week. The wounds on his forearm were bloody as he furiously scratched at them every time he got close to falling asleep. His cheeks were bruised from the repeated slapping and the feeble attempts to wake himself up time and time again. However, despite his best efforts, he slipped into a short, struggled nap. Somewhere between being awake and asleep, he started hearing a distorted voice. "Can you even call it a voice?" he thought, since the voice sounded more like an echo in the back of his head, with a grating metallic after sound. Suddenly, Michael woke up from the nap. He struggled to keep himself awake, but he kept falling asleep and then waking up again. It only lasted for a few seconds, but that was time enough for the voice to return. With each passing nightmare, the voice was getting louder and louder. Michael could not understand the words it was trying to communicate, but they terrified him all the same. After a couple of hours of repeatedly falling prey to the bursts of short naps, his body finally gave up, and he collapsed on the wooden floor. He felt it in his bones that he would not be able to wake up immediately. In that hypnagogic state, still unsure if he was asleep or awake, he noticed a dark silhouette sitting on his writing chair, staring down at him. It was the same figure with the ragged hood that was stalking his nightmares, only that it was not a hood, but long, scraggly black hair, resting on its shoulders, covering most of its upper arms. Michael tried to look at its face, but there was no face there to witness. No matter how hard he tried to focus on its face, he could not see through the darkness surrounding it. As he lay there flat on his back, staring at the dark humanoid shape, its metallic chuckle froze the blood in his veins once again, followed by the eerie voice talking to him. As the dark figure stood up, several locks of dark hair started to slowly float unnaturally around its head, almost touching the ceiling of the room. As it moved its limbs, a strange smoke-like mist radiated from its body, rapidly dissipating into the air. Motionless, Michael had no choice but to listen. And after a few moments, the unintelligible metallic whispers became clearer and clearer until he could finally understand them. The shadowy miscreation asked him if he wanted to be freed from the nightmares that haunt him. Before Michael could even formulate an answer, the shadow continued talking, informing him that the task ahead was simple. He only needed to finish writing his story, and he shall be released from this torment. Confused and still paralyzed by fear, he blinked, and before getting the chance to speak, the shadowy figure was gone, and he was wide awake. Chapter 11. Michael got his unfinished book from the basement and rested it upon his desk. He sat there staring at it for hours, uneasy about fulfilling the request of his shadow visitor. Thinking about his initial draft of the ending, he started shaking his head. No. I cannot write this. I need to change it, he said, as he started writing down a new set of ideas. As the sunlight was getting weaker, he rushed to finish the first draft of the ending. Before he could move on to writing the final result on the pages of the red book, the clock struck midnight, and not a second later, the shadow figure appeared right in front of his desk, silently glaring down at the contents of the drafts he had been writing all day. It's finished. I just need to write it down in the book. Please, I need more time, he pleaded, as the penumbral figure picked up the pages, piercing some of them with its dark claw-like fingernails. By instinct, Michael once again tried to glance at its face, but he saw nothing but pitch-black darkness. Despite not seeing its face, he could feel that it was angry, and inevitably it scattered the pages down on the floor and let out an atrocious metallic screech, followed by a guttural growl. Before Michael could react, it grabbed the book and shoved it violently into his chest, knocking him off the chair, causing his head to hit the wooden floor. Before blacking out, he heard a fading shout, ordering him to finish it, obviously referring to the book. What followed was a nightmare 100 times worse than all the previous nightmares he has had before combined. Michael was back in the dark room, tied up on a wooden chair in front of the huge mirror, the monstrous creatures haunting his dreams repeatedly ripped him to pieces. The background sound of the agonizing screams, demoniacal laughter, while his distorted reflection stared down at him, with a grin on its face, stretching from ear to ear. Only about 8 minutes had passed by the time he finally woke up, but for Michael, it felt like a lifetime. As he got up, a metallic surface on his desk reflected the full moon's light that was coming through the windows. It was the knife he had dropped in the basement all those days before. Its tip was stuck in the wooden table, piercing a pile of pages. As soon as he glimpsed the contents of those pages, he realized in horror what the shadow meant by finishing the book. It wanted him to write the original ending he had drafted. He spent the whole night and the following day reading through his drafts and writing. Desperate to finish the book before nightfall, Michael ignored the strong impulse he felt coming from every cell of his body, begging him to stop writing. "It's the only way I can get out of this," he reassured himself as he wrote down the last paragraph 3 minutes before midnight. As he was anticipating the arrival of his unwelcomed guest mere moments away, he leafed through his book and read the subtitle he had written down weeks ago. "My soul to take," he whispered somberly as the clock struck 12. "My soul to take. Diary. Date crossed out. I just got on the bus en route to the city. After the graduation ceremony, they told us about a part-time job as a substitute teacher at the Narto University, the neighboring province. It's quite far away, so nobody was even remotely interested in living such a lonely life, far away from our cozy little hometown and its close-knit community. Unlike my former classmates, I had nothing to hold me back. I had no job, no family, no girlfriend, not even a pet. To be honest, I was eager to leave the small apartment I was sharing with my friend, name crossed out, so I decided to go ahead and take the job. I never really fit in anyway. I found this cheap little house up for rent. It was next to a remote road on the outskirts of the city, rather far away from any other houses, and about 20 minutes away from the nearest bus station. At first, due to the low price for renting the whole house, I was a little worried that it would turn out to be some rat-infested old dump, so I had to call ahead to check just in case. The property was bank-owned at the time, and I was told that it's cheaper because of the lack of accessible public transport to the city, and that the previous owner passed away and left no papers for the house. He had no known relatives or any kind of acquaintances that knew him, so the bank eventually got the house, and after being abandoned for an extended period of time, it was put up for rent, and so it stayed for months on end. Although nobody lived there for quite a while, I was kindly reassured that the house was in good shape, that I won't have any problems, apart from the actual location of the house and the outdated decor. Now, I'm sitting at the back of the bus, and I am quite bored. This nice old lady, sitting right across from me, tried to cheer me up by giving me a few crossword puzzles, ripped from the pages of all local newspapers. She seems to be used to this long route, as she literally carries a bag full of red pages with puzzles, funny quotes, bad jokes, and short comics. After finishing the crossword puzzles, I turned the page around to read the random articles from the newspaper. They were a couple of years old, and apart from some partial news articles, it had nothing worth reading. One of the funnier articles was about a lost cat found living happily with some random new owners for about a year until its original owners found it. The rest were about police investigations. One was about drug traffickers, another about a brutal car accident, and this last one was about an old man found dead in his sleep. Apparently, his death was considered to have been, to quote the paper, under strange circumstances. This particular article was ripped off, so I couldn't quite read any details, apart from the title and a partial picture, so I moved on to browsing through the rest of the pages when I realized the bus was coming to a stop. I thanked the old lady and I got ready to get off the bus. It's finally time to check out the big city. Date crossed out. I just signed the papers for the house. It looks great. The bedroom is huge for this tiny house, and I love that. There is an empty room upstairs, where I found an old rocking chair in front of a seemingly unused fireplace. I like the feel of the room, so I decided to set up my paintings on the walls there. The rocking chair looks ancient compared to the rest of the furniture, but I think it gives the room a very relaxing touch, so I'll just leave it there for now. After I finish unpacking, I should really try to get some sleep. Tomorrow I'm going to the university to talk about the last details of my contract with the principal. I'm supposed to be starting work next week. I'm very excited about this job and admittedly a little nervous. Side note, the chair is actually quite comfortable despite the rough appearance. Date crossed out. I'm back from my first day at the university. The class I teach is great and they have a lot of potential, so I'm feeling very optimistic. I think I will show them the new painting I'm working on as soon as I finish it, of course. Between getting ready for the new job and moving out to the city, I didn't have much time for my art, but hopefully I'll get some work done on it soon. I also have to find some time to update my personal information at work, since my old flatmate has told me that they were still sending letters to my old address. I'll just do it later. I'm too excited about the job right now, and there is no hurry. I just finished setting up the rest of my paintings in the room. I call it the gallery room now, and it will also be the place where I'll work on my future paintings. I've got quite the workshop set up here. Date crossed out. It's been a few weeks now. Although this city isn't as quiet as my hometown, it's pretty nice, and I love my job at the university. My students really like me, as far as I can tell, and they're showing signs of improvement with every passing day. I'm lucky to work with such a talented group. Unfortunately, I am rather busy, so I won't be able to write as often as I used to. Oh well. On a more positive note, I'm almost done with my new painting. I'm sitting on the rocking chair, looking at it right now as I'm writing this. I can't wait to show it to my class. However, it might have to wait until after the group exposition we have planned for the next month, since I'm also working on a few paintings with some of my students. Side note, God, this chair is so comfortable. I love it. Many pages seem to have been ripped out. Date crossed out. really busy for the past couple of months. I didn't have much time for myself, but I finally managed to finish my painting much later than I anticipated. I feel quite tired, even though it's pretty early in the day. Maybe I'm tired because of all of the extra work and staying up late for so many consecutive days in order to paint. I'll get a good night's rest, and tomorrow I'll show the painting to the class. They were quite disappointed that I didn't bring it to the class exposition, but that was their chance to shine, not mine, and it wasn't finished yet anyway. Despite the minor disappointment, they're still very excited about the painting. Reminder: the university secretary kindly reminded me that I still need to update my personal information, so I'll just write it down. Hopefully I won't forget to grab a copy of my documents next week to submit them. Monday, rest of the date crossed out. I just arrived home and I feel exhausted. Something unusual happened at work today that still leaves me scratching my head when I think about it. When I showed the painting to the class, a girl asked me how I managed to get the blurry smudge-like effect on the lower part of my painting. I was shocked when I noticed the smudged area that she pointed out. I was cautious with the painting, and I'm quite positive that it was completely dry when I framed it. How did this happen? It felt kind of embarrassing, but I just went with the flow and said it was accidental, but I thought it looked good and kept it. I'm so confused right now, but I'm too tired to even think. It's only 9 p.m., but I really need some sleep. Wednesday, rest of the date crossed out. I just woke up. It's Wednesday, and I have slept in for 2 days straight. What the hell? I've got countless missed calls from work, obviously, and after I tried my best to explain the situation, I was told to go get myself checked out. I apologized for the inconvenience and scheduled an appointment with the doctor. I'm concerned. I need to think. I'm going to sit down in the gallery room. It relaxes me. Date crossed out. I've been exhausted for the past few days. The doctor said there is nothing wrong with me and that I'm just tired from work. I started to eat healthier. I don't stay up late anymore. Not that I could even manage to, considering my current state. But nothing works. I feel weird. I don't know how to describe it, but I noticed that I seem to be just fine while outside or at work. But as soon as I get home, my body just collapses on the bed like a ton of bricks. Date crossed out. I am terrified. I was kind of getting used to the unusual exhaustion. Things were okay until this girl from my class, name crossed out, came to see me after class, quite worried. She asked me if I was feeling okay because she thought that I looked like I was in terrible shape. Meanwhile, her friend walked by and dismissively told her, "You know what they say, right? Teacher appear to grow older faster because of all the stress and stuff." I was confused, so I excused myself and rushed to the bathroom and found the nearest mirror. I can't recall the last time I've really looked at myself in the mirror. As soon as I caught a glance of my reflection, I was terrified. I looked tired, exhausted even. I also had huge bags under my eyes and looked almost 10 years older. I finally got home. I tried calling the doctor earlier, but he's away on vacation. His assistant gave me the number of a colleague of his. The new doctor week when he has an opening in his schedule. I rushed to my desk and looked for my documents. When I pulled my ID out of the wallet, I started to freak out. My name, photograph, and every other personal detail on it was smudged. It looked just like the blurred part of the painting. All the text was crossed out. The picture of my face was smudged out beyond recognition. All you could make out was the shape of the face, maybe the color of my hair. It was eerie and unsettling. It made me feel sick to my stomach just by looking at it. I've spent hours looking for all my documents. The ones I could find are all blurred. The rest are simply gone. I instinctively touched the fireplace and it felt lukewarm, and there are some traces of ash inside of it. Maybe from papers. My documents. Am I going crazy? I literally don't know what to do. I called the university and asked for an extended leave of absence. When I was asked why, I just told them that I was seriously ill, desperately needed some time off. I didn't even wait for a reply before hanging up. I don't want to be seen like this. Some pages seem to have been burnt off. The date is blank. It was almost midnight. I can't even remember what day of the week it is. And I was just sitting here in the rocking chair, thinking about what to do, when I scratched my head. To my great despair, I realized that I was starting to lose hair. Handfuls of my now gray hair were just falling on the wooden floor in front of me. I started to cry, staring at the grayed out hair in my hands. It took me a while to recover from the shock, but then it hit me. I remembered the newspaper article I read on the bus. The old man must have been found in this house. There was part of a picture of a room. It was black and white, and the rest of the page was ripped off, but I could swear I saw a glimpse of a rocking chair in the picture. Now that I think about it, it was the very chair I'm sitting in right now. Writing this down, almost lifeless and terrified down to the very core of my soul. How did I not realize this before? Am I just imagining things? Maybe I'm just sick and paranoid. Maybe I have Alzheimer's disease or something, and I've been sitting here in this chair for years, waking up each day not remembering what happened the day before. Could that even be possible? I'm so scared. What can I do? What? The date is blank. I must have passed out. I don't know what time it is. I don't even know what day it is. I looked at my paintings, and all of them are blurred, and so are my pictures. It's like I don't exist anymore. No ID, no pictures, not even the paintings I worked so hard on. There's absolutely nothing to prove who I am. Nothing at all. They are all just like me, a smeared shadow of what they used to be. I am nothing. Maybe I should get rid of them, burn them, or maybe I should just get out of this damned house. The door is locked. I can't seem to be able to break the windows either. Maybe I'm too weak to break them. It took me days I've been lying on the ground, unconscious. I barely got up, but as soon as I was standing straight, I violently collapsed on the rocking chair. I can barely write anymore, but it feels like it's the only thing I can do. It's literally the only thing I'm still capable of doing, although it's getting harder with each passing sentence. The pen feels so heavy, and I'm exhausted. I don't think I have much time left. It took me hours to write this last paragraph. I might as well write my name down. This is the only piece of paper that proves that I ever existed. I'll write as long as I can stay awake. Hopefully somebody will read it. My name is name crossed out, and I was born in rest of the paragraph crossed out. Those were the contents of the journal found next to the rocking chair of an old man found dead in his house. No paintings, pictures, or documents were found in the house, apart from pieces of paper and glass found in the ashes collected from the fireplace. There were nails on the walls where the paintings would have been, and the chair's armrest had quite a few lines drawn on the lower part. These lines belonged to many different colored pens, pencils, and other writing instruments. Some looked much older than the others. The last one was from a blue pen, matching the type and brand of the pen used to write the latest contents of the journal, as proven by the forensic analysis team. The pages previously to these were strangely crossed out or smeared using some kind of thick black brush, or simply just ripped off or burnt. Nothing else from the journal is legible, apart from the pages attached above. The handwriting slowly changed throughout the text. The obvious changes in the handwriting could indicate the level of stress and the mood swings that the author was suffering from at the time of writing them, leading up to the very last paragraphs, where the handwriting was barely readable. The police made inquiries at all the universities in the cities close to the house, looking for the records regarding art teachers in the area, and found none matching the address of the house where the man was found in. It's also worth noting that nobody recognized the picture of the victim's body. Most of the absent teachers were much younger. Most of the older teachers that were not accounted for were crossed out as they did not resemble the victim. Based on the frequent alterations in writing patterns, the forensic analysts assumed that the victim suffered from some kind of multiple personality disorder. It is believed that the so-called alter egos tend to have different types of behavior, mood swings, and even different styles of handwriting, among many other personality differences in many recorded cases. They also assumed that the old man was writing a fantasy journal or some kind of personal experience from his past, which would explain the lack of any information about his younger self that he describes in the journal, probably caused by his decaying mental health. It is possible that, in his mind, he was not truly able to differentiate between the events from the present and those of the past, leading to his feelings of paranoia and depression. The house witnessed its second strange death to date, so it was closed down for investigation. However, assuming the journal was just the creation of an old madman's troubled mind that led to him burning down his documents and other personal belongings. The official cause of death was determined to be asphyxiation caused by the smoke. The investigation was also influenced by the lack of leads or evidence of foul play. Therefore, the case was closed. The house is now up for rent again. Online news article ends. Chapter 12. When Michael looked up from the book, his gaze was met by the tall, dark silhouette standing motionless in front of him. They stood there for a while in silence, till eventually it put out its clawed hand expectantly. "Write down your name and sign the book," said the dark miscreation in its awful, raspy, metallic voice that Michael knew too well. Feeling exhausted and defeated, he did not protest or resist, so he signed the book as instructed. As he handed over the open book, he froze while staring at the dark, faceless figure. His gaze got lost into the dark void surrounded by the abnormally floating black hair. It did not move its hand, but Michael's grip was growing tighter around the lukewarm dark red cover, his index finger pushing down on the coarse pages. The shadow grunted and pulled the book away as Michael let go, cutting the tip of his finger in the process. A droplet of blood fell on the little title page by his signature. As he was recovering his senses, the shadow was about to shut the book, but not before he could see the page starting to slowly burn around the bloodstain as the faint runes at the bottom of the page lit up in a reddish glow. As the burn formed a strangely familiar rectangle hole into the page, the shadow slammed the book shut. Michael felt lightheaded. His vision became blurry as the shadow's hair slowly fell down on its shoulders, resembling a ragged hood once more. The lights abruptly went out, and a metallic chuckle could be heard coming from where it stood as it disappeared into the darkness. The lights started to flicker, and after a few moments they came back to normal, and so did Michael's vision. Unsure about if what just happened was real or merely another dream, he just collapsed on the couch and fell asleep. After sleeping for almost 18 hours, he woke up and headed straight into the basement. He looked everywhere, but the boxes containing the books were nowhere to be seen. They just vanished, he uttered, astounded by the fact that the boxes disappeared. After hours of searching all over the house, he lay down on the couch, still flabbergasted and debilitated both physically and mentally. "Am I going mad?" he asked himself, while slowly scratching his head, still feeling the lump on his head from the fall in the bathroom. As he instinctively checked his hands to see if there was any blood coming out of the wound, he noticed a patch of hair in his hand. The strands of hair looked discolored and weak, while the back of his hand showed wrinkles that had not been there the night before. It felt surreal, just as described in the book he just finished writing. Am I dying like the character in my story? Did I just sell my soul to this shadowy fiend? He thought, as he laid on his back, exhausted, staring blankly at the ceiling. "I'm just tired, that's all," he said in a gravelly, raspy voice was the narration of my ebook, Purgatory Diaries My Soul to Take. Another shout out to Kirana ASMR for taking part in this long format videos. Thank you guys for watching. If you enjoyed this narration, let us know in the comments. Drop a like and subscribe for more content. Goodbye, and I'll see you around in Purgatory.